Welcome to the free preview of the top 10 questions auto workers are asking about retirement. In this video, we'll run through the first 3 questions, and for full access to the webinar, please visit big3retiree.com. Starting us off with question number 1 is Certified Financial Planner Steve Paul, and your question is, what are my basic pension options?
Sure. Well, when you look at the different pension options, we have really single life and then joint survivor options. So single life is pretty self-explanatory. You're a single person. You want to maximize your benefit. You're not worried about any type of survivorship benefit. There's no spouse to be taken care of, so you're electing single life. Then you have the joint and survivorship options. We're sitting down with a couple. We always look at health, longevity, and we got to look at the different survivorship options because we never want to elect single life. We're dealing with a married couple, because then if the employee of the company, the one with the pension, passes away and we elect single life, nothing transfers to their spouse. We want to make sure there's some benefit in place for the spouse. So really we're looking at the survivorship options. Typically most companies are defaulting to around 65%, but they usually give you a 75% option and a 100% survivor option. In a lot of cases, especially if your spouse is in great health, we'd want to look at the 100% survivor option.
Yeah, and I know a lot of clients that we see as well, they might have, say hypothetically, the husband is retiring and the wife has some sort of health ailment. They could still maybe take a reduction down to 50%, or maybe even take the single life option, or possibly even take this third option, the lump sum buyout. Could you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely, when we look at the joint survivor options, it's on a case-by-case basis, for sure. Right. There's no right answer there. And there's no right answer when it comes to the pension versus the lump sum. So you just asked me about the lump sum buyout. It's definitely something that you always want to take a look at. We want to look at the payout of the pension. What are they paying you on the lump sum on a year-to-year basis? Is it down around 5%? Is it a 6.7% payout? Is it a 7% payout? Who knows what it's going to be, but we want to evaluate the strength of the payout on the lump sum, the strength of the pension. If it's not strong, we'll look at the lump sum buyout as another option. But when you take the lump sum, you need to be responsible with the money. You no longer have that safe pension in play. You have to create your own now. You're now responsible for investing the money and generating retirement income. So if you are going the route of a lump sum, you want to work with a professional. You want to sit down, and really my recommendation is have your advisor run it both ways. What does it look like if I retire with a pension? You have a spouse. What does it look like if I retire with a pension at the 65% survivor, 100% survivor? And what does it look like if I take the lump? You want to know what it looks like both ways. Our job as advisors are really to educate you first and foremost on the different options out there.
Sure. And one of the big concerns, if you are taking that pension, especially with 2008 here in Michigan and Detroit, there was a lot of concern if your company were to go under, and say, what if you take that pension, either a single or joint pension and protecting a spouse? What if you take that pension and another 2008 occurs and your company potentially goes under? Mm-hmm. What are we looking at there?
Well, that's where the PBGC comes into play, the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation. They're there to ensure that you still have some type of benefit. Now, it may not be your full benefit. You could see some type of cut if they take over. But your company has been paying a premium to them to make sure there's an added level of protection. So if something does happen within your own company, within the pension there, they're there as a level of protection, as insurance, to make sure that you still receive some type of benefit.
Yeah, and I see for someone retiring, let's say full retirement age, and that 67 age, mm-hmm. they've actually got $7,000 in protected benefits for a straight life annuity. But the problem for auto workers is that you can retire early. You can get your 30 years in and be in your early mid-50s. It's not uncommon. So part of the problem is,
especially with the buyouts that we've been seeing, I mean, mid-50s, late 50s is definitely not uncommon. Early 60s, absolutely not uncommon. And if you look at early 60s, some of the benefits that we're throwing up on the screen here in late 50s, there could be some issues and some definite cuts if the PBGC were to come in and take over.
Right, because say hypothetically you take that pension at age 55, and say your company's paying you $3,600, so $1,000 more, and then you potentially have an early supplement to protect you up to age 62. You could lose all of that, and then even some of your pension, and you're now only getting $2,600 a month. So for those younger retirees, definitely something you want to keep your eye on and see how much of your pension is protected. Now moving on, we have a fun little analogy, and we're going to keep things somewhat auto-themed here. So I apologize in advance if there's too many auto analogies, but this one is buying versus leasing a car. So when you walk into a dealership, you've got two basic options. You can buy a car, you can lease a car. There's not a wrong answer. They both have their pros and cons. Now, for example, my wife, she's the type that likes to lease a car because you get a little bit more bang for your buck. You get more car for the price that you're putting down, and you also have the peace of mind. You have the peace of mind of knowing that there's no repairs, that you can just keep exchanging in your lease, and it's just nice and consistent. You don't have to worry one bit. Versus buying, which is really my preference because I control the asset. I have the ability to customize it. When I wanted to put the auto start on my car so I didn't have to deal with it in the winter, I can do that. I don't have to get approval from an auto company or anything like that. And I can also gift it. If I wanted to gift it, say I had a 16-year-old daughter, I don't. I could gift it to her. I know, Steve, you've got kids, and that could be something that you do down the line. But it just kind of shows you the basic approach to coming at this decision and ways to think about it. And Steve, I'll have you see if you can tie that back into taking the pension versus the lump sum.
First off, I love the creativity. That was a wonderful analogy, keeping it auto-themed. You know, it comes down to, do you want to own the asset or do you want to lease? And when you take the pension, first of all a pension is an annuity through your employer. That's it. And when you take the pension, you're annuitizing. You're giving up the right to the money immediately. So you have a structured payout for the rest of your life on a month-to-month basis, a year-to-year basis, which I love. It protects clients. They know where income's coming from. It's great. It's just the fact that you are giving up the right to the money. And in a lot of cases here, we're not talking about a $250,000 lump sum. We're talking about $750,000, $1 million, $1.5 million. I mean, we're talking about a considerable amount of money in the portfolio, where if something happens to you, God forbid something happens to you early on in retirement, the first 5 years, let's say you had $1 million lump and there's still $800,000 sitting there that you have not spent yet, that does not go to your family. It does not go to your children. It goes back to the company. So when looking at the different options, that's something that you want to consider as will transfer important to you. So if you do buy the car, if you do take the lump sum, now you are in full control of the money. Something happens to you, the money goes to your kids, but you no longer have the monthly benefit. That's where we want to look at different options to create that same monthly benefit. In no way would our firm want to look to take that money and invest it aggressively in the market. We want to look at safer vehicles to replace your pension. We want to look at safe vehicles that aren't open to market loss, that are going to generate safe income on a month-to-month basis, just like your pension. But we want to make sure if you don't use your money, it doesn't go to your employer. It doesn't go to the insurance company. It goes to your family. It leaves them in a better position.
Perfect. And those are really the two basic options that you have. And Steve, appreciate you joining us for the webinar here. And hopefully, if the timing's right, you may come into the office and meet with Steve someday.
Hey, I enjoyed my time here. Keep the auto-themed analogies coming.
We'll do our best.
Joining us for question number 2 is Mike Sorrentino, who is a chartered financial analyst and our senior investment strategist. Now, not every retiree from the big three gets this lump sum choice, but for those who get it, Mike, your question is, why is my company offering me a lump sum to begin with?
Well, that's a very good question, Matt. I would say the big reason why they're offering you the lump sum is that it's really not their business. Meaning that, look, think about GM and Ford and other large companies that have these huge pension plans. Ford and GM, their business is selling cars, right? They want to build cars and then sell them to the general public. They're not in the business of managing financial assets, or at least they don't want to be, because frankly, it's a headache. It's a headache. It's coming from a financial professional, trust me when I say that accounting rules and regulatory rules around pensions are incredibly complicated. It leaves a phenomenal amount of uncertainty on the hands of these C-level executives, and they just don't want to deal with it. I would say that there are a few things out there that are stranger than accounting rules. And when you think about the incentives behind these executives, look, a lot of these people are paid in company stock, okay? So the better the stock does, the better they do. And a lot of institutional investors out there do not like to see large pension liabilities sitting on the balance sheet because of that uncertainty. So it does tend to keep a lot of investors away from companies with large pension funds. And as a result, these executives probably aren't incentivized to just get rid of them.
Right. And if you look at a company like Tesla and their market cap and compare it to the big three, they don't have these pension liabilities weighing their company down at all. But you look at the various market caps and you're like, wait a minute, what's going on here?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. I mean, if you look at pensions, I haven't looked at Tesla's balance sheet in a long time, but last time I checked, there were no pension liabilities on there. And that's absolutely correct. I mean, if you think about Tesla, what's going on here, it's unbelievable. I would say that there's a big misconception, though, when I would be careful almost comparing too much Tesla to the automobile companies, Ford and GM to be specific, Chrysler and all the others. Tesla is not a pure play auto company. I know the media loves to compare Tesla stock, especially recently, to the GM and Ford, but they're, in my opinion, they're very, very different companies. Tesla's more of a technology incubator. The mind power, the software expertise, the engineering that goes into Tesla is vastly different than what you're seeing in Ford and GM and other companies. That, in fact, there's a bit of an identity crisis. If you think about what's going on in terms of Wall Street, I mean, even Wall Street can't quite figure out Tesla. You've got some of the top technology analysts in the world covering Tesla right now. It's very similar to what we saw maybe 10 or 15 years ago with Amazon, right? Back then, you had a lot of Wall Street analysts, retail analysts covering Amazon, but you also had technology analysts covering at the same time. They couldn't quite figure out how to look at the company. I think that's happening with Tesla right now, which is why you're seeing so much interest from multiple different angles. And particularly Tesla, even though they make cars like Ford and GM, they do a lot more than just make those cars.
Right, and being a newer company, they don't have to deal with these defined benefit pension obligations that we see with the Ford, GMs, Chryslers of the world. And this chart explains it perfectly. So if we go back 40 some years, in 1979, we see 60% of the retirement plans were defined benefit. And you can see that trend going down and down and down, while the defined contribution trend only went up and up and up. And now most employees, most retirees have these defined contribution plans. Now, I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but you have to understand that the investment burden is shifting from the employer to the employee, so we have a little bit more control over our retirements. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just the way it is.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I mean, look, again, you've mentioned some advantages already. I'd like to add to that. I mean, there's always that risk out there that company might not be around, right? I mean, companies go bankrupt. I feel like there's one or two articles about underfunded pensions every month or two in the Wall Street Journal. I mean, something can happen to these companies, and if they do, look, I mean, there's pension insurance out there, but that's not going to cover everybody. I mean, it only covers up to a certain amount, and it doesn't turn on like a light switch. I mean, if you have bills to pay and your pension goes away, what are you going to do? But I'd say, more philosophically, why do you want a company to manage your financial future that doesn't want to do it, right? I mentioned this earlier. These companies are in the business of selling stuff. They're not in the business of managing retirement. So why would you put your financial future in the hands of someone like that? Wouldn't you rather go out and find a financial advisor or a trusted professional whose incentives are aligned with yours?
Right. You just said the key words, Mike. Are their incentives aligned with yours? And that is absolutely critical when you're dealing with this amount of money. And that's why one of the questions we'll do later is, how do you find a financial advisor? And that's that F word, that fiduciary word. If you are working with an advisor, that you need to find a fiduciary advisor. But one of the other major concerns with people retiring from these companies is the big company out to get me? Is this some sort of trick? Which option's mathematically better? And the truth is, they're mathematically very similar from an actuarial standpoint. It's not a trick, it's not a scam, but there's one thing that you have to keep in mind, and that's if you're bad with money and you don't plan on working with a financial coach, you may not want to take this lump sum because you could spend it down. And there's a study, we've got it up on the screen here, by MetLife, saying that for people who take a lump sum type of money, 21% depleted that lump sum very quickly. The average was 5.5 years. That's a major problem.
That's a big problem. Matt, I'm going to add to that actually, because I think the fundamental issue there is, yes, some people have difficulty managing their own assets. But even for those that don't feel like they're going to end up in that cohort, I'm gonna make a recommendation to everybody is that you can't do this on your own anymore. The days of what I call the days of easy retirement, they're over, and they are not coming back in any of our lifetimes. All right. Think about it this way. Think about, we're talking about automobiles. Back in the 70s when I was growing up as a kid, when our family car broke down, my dad, who was not an auto mechanic, would go out to the garage, grab his toolkit, and he'd fix the car somehow. I mean, he would change spark plugs or whatever else needed to be done. He was not a professional, like I said, but he knew enough to get by. Today, the cars that are coming out, and I'm not talking just Teslas, all right? I'm talking about almost all cars these days. You need a computer engineering degree to change the air of the tires. I mean, they're computers on wheels, right? So, look, you're not gonna fix cars these days on your own. You have to have a trained mechanic. Now, is that a bad thing? I don't think so, right? Because cars today, they park themselves. They're safer. They have more airbags. They do some pretty amazing things. The trade-off for that innovation is that you can't do it yourself anymore. You can't fix it yourself. That's what's been happening in financial markets over the last 20 years. The sophistication in financial markets today, it's virtually unthinkable that someone could manage their own retirement assets. Again, this is not a sales pitch. This is a reality of the world we live in. Think about trying to generate income right now. You can't just go out and buy a couple of passive index funds and expect to pay the bills anymore. You need a professional that knows what they're doing, because the good news is the opportunity for investors right now is arguably better than it's been in several decades. But you just can't bring a wrench to this type of a market. You need to bring a sophisticated tool.
This brings us to our first special offer for our listeners today. If you're intimidated by the thought of retirement planning and overwhelmed with these decisions, you're not alone. Our complete planning review will help you gain clarity on if you're able to retire with the assets you've saved. For auto workers facing a lump sum decision, we'll also run a side-by-side pension comparison. This would help you visualize how your retirement would look if you opted for the lump sum versus the lifetime pension, and help you answer the questions keeping you up at night. We'll also discuss how you can incorporate Social Security into your overall income plan. And finally, we'll run a risk and fee assessment on your current portfolio to make sure you're not taking more risk than you're comfortable with and not paying excess fees that you may be unaware of. All you need to do is pull out your phone and shoot us a text. Send the letters CPR to 248-305-9911. When you come in, we promise there will be no pressure. The first meeting is a get-to-know-you session where we learn more about you and your goals. Then a week or two later, we'll get back together and run through all of the above reports. Again, all you need to do is pull out your phone and text the letters CPR to 248-305-9911, or feel free to give us a call at that number, or visit us online at rwpaul.com. That's rwpaul.com.